Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, July 28th. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. On today's show, we talk Big 12 and its future. The league and all of college sports was stunned last week by the news that Texas and Oklahoma had asked to join the SEC. The schools made their invitation request official on Tuesday. We don't know exactly when Texas and OU will join the new conference, but we know it's happening. What becomes of the remaining Big 12 schools? On today's show, we talk to Kellis Robinett, who covers Kansas State for the Kansas City Star, and Wichita Eagle, and Drew Davison. He covers TCU for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. We break down the situation, discuss best options for the remaining 8 schools, and take a guess at how the college landscape may shape up in the years to come. Let's get started talking Big 12 and college sports. Kellis Robinett from the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star has joined us, along with Drew Davison from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And Kellis covers K-State. Drew covers TCU. If you didn't know, those teams are in the Big 12. And guys, we think there's going to be a Big 12 this season, right? I mean, this season's safe. We are going to have a Big 12 this year, right?
Yes, we are, Blair. I think 2021-22 is safe. Come 2022 football, I fully expect Texas and Oklahoma to be playing in SEC schedule. I just see no way that they're going to play out the media rights. I mean, just think about from a recruiting perspective. You can't go sell a recruit. Oh, your first 2 years of college, you're going to play the Big 12 where every opposing fan base just hates you. And then, you'll finish off your college career in the SEC. So I think both schools eventually will pony up, or the Big 12 is going to be non-existent, by that time with different schools trying to find live refs or whatnot. But yeah, for at least one more year, I think the Big 12 is safe.
I think we got more years than that of the Big 12. I don't know what the Big 12 will look like after 2022 or 2023. I definitely disagree with Jamie Pollard at Iowa State, who posted a video yesterday who said that it was going to be there through 2025 and Oklahoma and Texas would be in the league no matter what that long. I'm with Drew. I don't see that happening. There's just way too much uncertainty. Nobody wants to be a lame duck team in a conference for 4 whole years. I think really it's just the two big questions are, when are those teams leaving and how much money are they going to have to pay to get out? And I guess the third question is, what are the 8 remaining Big 12 teams going to do with that money when they get it?
Well, we're going to attack all of those questions on this show. My pie in the sky dream was for Texas and Oklahoma to stick to the statement that those guys made today. Today is Tuesday, which was their official, basically, request for admission to the SEC, saying that on July 1st, 2025, they want to be admitted into the SEC. So I'm thinking, well, that's 4 more years. And Drew, you're absolutely right. You can't recruit to that. That would make it ridiculous in recruiting. But if there was some way to, delay the entry of Texas and Oklahoma until the grant of rights expires, college sports would have more time than the next couple of months to rethink or reimagine the landscape. And, right now, all we're doing is talking about the Pac-12, the Big Ten, even the ACC, what could go on with those conferences. Those leagues don't want to have to make decisions in the next couple of weeks. I think if they had time to study it, to maybe look at what a super conference landscape could be, then we can take more time to settle this. But that's never how realignment has worked before. It's always been a rush job. It was in 2010 when Colorado and Nebraska left the Big 12, and it was a year later when Missouri and Texas M left the Big 12. And in all 4 of those cases, they were out within a year of the announcement. They played the final year in the league, and then they went off to their new conferences. So that's what happens in realignment. So let's look at this from the remaining schools' standpoint, and I'll ask you guys who you think, because I get asked this all the time. Let's talk about options for the remaining 8 and what most likely scenarios? Kellis, I'll start with you. You cover Kansas State. I don't know what their most likely scenario is, but to me, their best scenario is the Big 12 staying together in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I agree. If you're a Wildcats fan right now, I don't see a whole lot of hope for them going rogue and saying, you know what, we're going to find a life raft to the Big Ten, the Pac-12, or the ACC. I mean, anything's possible, I suppose, but I don't know that Kansas State has enough standalone value in the world of conference alignment to go do that. I think their best hope is for all 8 teams to stick together, unite, and say, you know what, with Texas and Oklahoma gone, we can take their exit fees, which could be as much as $160 million. It's a nice chunk of change. Use that to prepare for any kind of debts we might run into. Maybe use it to entice some other new schools to come in. And if you do that, I mean, we've seen the Big 8 work before with some other teams. I'll call the remaining 8 the Big 8 for these purposes.
I like
you take the Big 8, you add the 4 best teams available to get back to 12. And I don't know who those are. Maybe it's Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, Central Florida. You can maybe say Memphis. Any of those teams like that. I know some have suggested maybe you bring in one of the Arizona schools, tell Colorado to come back. I don't know how realistic that is, but I do think it's possible that if all 8 schools stuck together, they could poach the best team from the Mountain West, the AAC, and still be a pretty viable league. They wouldn't be what they are now. They wouldn't make $40 million in TV revenue, but they make enough to be competitive. They'd be a very, very strong basketball conference with KU, Baylor, and the other teams are bringing in. Houston was in the Final Four last year. It'd be a great basketball conference. Would they play fun football? Whoever wins the thing would get an automatic bid into the expanded playoff. And we've seen Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, they've all fielded teams capable of winning games in the playoff and making some noise there. So if they can unite and have it where not everybody's out looking for themselves, I think there is a viable path forward. And for a school like Kansas State, I think that's their best path. Maybe there is 1 or 2 teams not named Kansas State that has better options. And for K-State, I think that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, like K-State, KU, Iowa State, there's something special about, the basketball tournament in Kansas City. It'd be great to keep that intact, especially for those fan bases, just essentially being in the backyard, so to speak. And then if you look at TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, you got the football championship right here in AT&T Stadium, home of the Cowboys. So there is some appeal to trying to make the Big 12 stay together, especially for a school like TCU or K-State, where, you really could be on the outside looking in. But I think the harsh reality is if the ACC extends an invite to West Virginia or Kansas, they're gone. If the Big 10 makes hands something to KU or Iowa State or whoever, they're gone. The Pac-12, if Texas Tech has the landing spot there, they're gone. So as much as you'd like to think the 8 would band together, I just don't see it as being too realistic. But I think for the near term, and kind of like you said, Blair, maybe you kind of run out Big 12 as long as you can and kind of see where the college landscape is in 3 or 4 years. I think that would be beneficial to some other leagues as well as the 8 remaining schools.
Well, you both have commissioner futures. You both good ideas. Look, you bring up some good points. Let's start with Kellis. I like the schools that you named as possible additions to a Big 12. I have long advocated Houston as a Big 12 member. I think it was mostly Texas that kept Houston out of the conference. Was about 5 years ago when expansion was last on the table, when the Big 12 explored it. I think with Texas and Texas A&M and the SEC, if the Big 12 remains intact, that the conference should plant a flag in downtown Houston and say, the urban school is ours. And if you want to play in a solid conference and play in the state of Texas, you can come to the University of Houston. You don't have to go to A&M or UT. So I think that would be target number 1 for the Big 12. I also like Cincinnati, assuming if West Virginia stays in, Cincinnati gives West Virginia a team that's something of a travel partner. BYU has always been a curious program. I think Texas is also the one that kept BYU out of the discussions over the years. And Central Florida, of course, was an attractive school to the Big 12 in terms of the expansion talks a few years ago. But again, that never, I can remember being in a press conference in Dallas with David Bourne, the Oklahoma president, basically putting the kibosh on expansion. Said they explored it. Nobody's going to bring additional value. We'd have to cut the pie, two more slices or whatever it would be at the time, and it just wasn't going to make sense for them. But if the Big 12 stayed together, it certainly would make sense. And Drew, the idea of this hits home for people in Kansas City, the basketball tournament. That's a big thing here. It's an important annual event. I know in Texas, Texas OU at the Cotton Bowl is a major event, and I've covered a lot of those, and I've told people there that as important as that game is to Dallas, the Big 12 basketball tournament is equally important in Kansas City and to Kansas City. So I think that whatever it takes to preserve that should be strongly considered as teams go forward. Having said all that, and having filibustered here, I'll let you guys chime in here, but there's no doubt that if the Big Ten came to Kansas and or Iowa State, or if the Pac-12 came to Oklahoma State or Texas Tech, that they would and should accept an invitation to those leagues. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't know how you can't, if, stability and whatnot. The big thing to me is I do kind of like me personally as a fan, I think if you add Houston, Memphis, Cincy, that's you strengthen your basketball league. You like we said, you keep the Big 12 tournament, but if one of those bigger conferences comes calling, I don't know how you stay back. And we'll take the, go from 37, 40 million payout to 20 million. Oh, well, the Big 12's going to pay us 50 plus million, or the Big 10, excuse me. So I think any of those schools will. The Pac-12 to me is kind of, as much as the Big 12 wants to merge with them and maybe have some sort of scheduling alliance, they're not. I think the remaining 8 Big 12 schools and some of the schools we've mentioned would give the Pac-12 a run for the money as the 4th best football league in the country some years. I mean, the Pac-12 has kind of struggled, and there's some questions about what their TV package is going to look like in a few years. So I think their conference has to expand. So it will be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, I mean, I do think, any of those schools, if one of the 4 Power Fives offers them, they're gone.
I think definitely Big Ten. I don't know how you would turn that down. ACC, I don't know how you would turn that down. SEC, you definitely wouldn't turn that down. I think there's maybe some doubt on the Pac-12. I think probably still any team that would get such an offer would leave, but it's not necessarily a slam dunk for me. We don't know what they're going to look like soon. But it is debatable though. That they have USC, they have Washington, they have Oregon, but even none of those teams were really on the level of USC and Texas. So there's kind of an interesting, pull there, just like Drew said. I think most years the Big 8 could be just as competitive with the Pac-12 as vice versa. It would really come down to money in that scenario. I think this is kind of where Blair's point comes in. If people would, give this a year or two to shake out and then make a decision, I think what people would do would be a lot different than next week, if you know what I mean. Because right now everybody's just panicking. If you're a fan of a Big 8 school right now, you just want to know where you're going to be, right? It doesn't matter. It's going to be Pac-12, fine. Let's make it happen now. I just don't want to be left out in the cold. So I think that'll be interesting too, if any offers do happen. When do they come? And that could entice things. But I guess all we know is right now, it seems like every team has reached out to the Pac-12 to see about it. So they're interested. You know that much.
Yeah. Well, and let me make one other quick point. So, Blair kind of talked, I think it was 2016 when they interviewed all those teams, the Cincy's, the UCFs, the Memphis, the Houstons. They didn't expand then. And obviously a lot of schools are turning up their nose because they feel like the media package would not even come close to what they're getting now by adding group of 5 schools. But if you go back 5 years ago, if you would have added Cincy and UCF, let's say, both programs have finished in the top 10 in football. They would have kind of blossomed into stars, homegrown by the Big 12, kind of like what TCU has been able to do, right? Becoming a nationally relevant football program once they got the shot in the Power 5. So I don't necessarily think it's the end of the world if there's no Power 5 schools that are coming, that you go add and cherry pick kind of the top of the group of 5 and see what they can become. And maybe a Houston really flourishes or a BYU under the Big 12 umbrella, and then you become more attractive. So I just sit here now, and obviously hindsight's 2020, but if UCF and Cincy are in the league and have had 5 years and have been top 25 teams and relevant, maybe have a New Year's 6 bid, it may be not looking as bleak as it does.
Yeah, there have been some other ideas floated out there in the last week or so. One has the Big Ten expanding, not to include Big 12 schools, but maybe the upper echelon of the Pac-12 and making it a kind of a Rose Bowl conference with making that the first maybe 18 or 20 team league. I've seen that. Also, some sort of a merger, or not merger, but agreement between the SEC and the ACC. And so there's all kinds of discussion out there now. Again, I just think let's take time, because what's happening in college sports right now, we're in the first year of name, image, and likeness. We're 2 years away probably from 12-team college football playoff. We're at this juncture of so much change already in college football. It took 2 years for 4 guys to come up with the 12-team college playoff. The NIL has been a discussion for many years, and let's just take a little bit of time and figure out what's going to happen with conference membership. So with that, let's take a break. And when we come back, I've got a couple other topics related to realignment that I want to talk to you guys about. We're back with Kellis Robinette and Drew Davison, and we're talking about realignment in the college sports landscape. And guys, I think we covered a lot of the possibilities for conference membership for the Big 12 and what might happen with super conferences. I wanted to take this conversation to a point where sort of the daily business of college sports, and of course it's all about recruiting in every college sport. So let's just say the Big 12 remains intact, and they either stays at 8 or adds a couple of members to 10. They lose their $37 to $40 million annually from TV. That gets cut in half. So it's diminished in sort of in a brand way. They're diminished. Does that change the recruiting landscape? We'll just call it for football. We'll just say for football. And the reason I bring this up is, if TCU wasn't already getting a player, already beating an SEC school or Texas or Oklahoma for a guy, does conference membership affect that, or would have an impact on that? What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. And I think TCU would have to work that much harder, right, to find the hidden gems and whatnot. And I think the biggest issue for TCU in the state of Texas is now the SEC was already kind of open with Houston or A&M kind of opening up the Houston market. But now that Texas and OU are in the SEC, I think the floodgates are open. And I think, Tennessee will walk into the state of Texas and feel they can get a guy just as much as an A&M or a Texas. So we'll kind of see how that shakes out. But yeah, I think it makes it that much harder for TCU. But with that being said, I mean, TCU they've always kind of prided themselves on finding those hidden gems. And, Andy Dalton, kind of flourished in the Mountain West, and Jerry Hughes played in the Mountain West when they won the Rose Bowl in 2010. So I think, it's not doom and gloom, but it is going to be a lot harder to get those type of players because, everyone especially if you look at the NFL draft numbers, the SEC is kind of the place to be, so to speak, if you want to go pro and make it. But obviously other conferences and leagues produce big time players too. And so it's not the end of the world, but it certainly makes an uphill battle even that much tougher for a school like TCU or Baylor or Texas Tech even.
Leaving that LaDainian Tomlinson there, huh?
Yeah, well, I was trying to go a little bit more recent, but yeah, LT was from Waco, and actually, I think he joined when they were in the Conference USA, so he truly flew under the radar. So that's just another miss, so to speak, by some of the powers in Texas letting him land at TCU.
Here's where I come down on this. There are, what is it, 100, somewhere between 125 and 130 FBS programs, right? Division I programs. I don't know, the number changes every year. And one or two get added every year. And every program has the same number of scholarships. So given that equation, there are the same number of recruits for the same number of schools every year. Why would conference affiliation change the math on this? So if you get what I'm saying, if Texas and Oklahoma and Alabama and Florida and Georgia, can't get everybody, there's still going to be there's still going to be players that Kansas State and Iowa State and TCU will be in the market for that aren't going to those the super rich of college football. And if I'm a college football assistant coach and I'm on the recruiting trail, I think especially if I'm in a market like Fort Worth, I can sell name, image, and likeness to a recruit there, and there's all kinds of business opportunities for that recruit. So maybe I'm not thinking about it right, but it just I'll be curious to see if we haven't had this happen in college sports in a way that it could happen, where programs like Kansas State, Iowa State, which for the entirety of their existence, 120 years or so, have always been in the top level of competition, and starting in a year or 4 years, they might not be there. And what happens to them from a brand standpoint or a recruiting standpoint?
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I'm not really sure what the answer is in regards to at least K-State recruiting. I don't know that it will have the greatest effect here, just because I can't really give you a name of somebody that they beat when they're going head to head with Texas or OU when they're in the same conference. So I don't know that that'll make a huge difference. They have occasionally, Jake Rubley was a 4-star quarterback who had offers from LSU and some other big places. They landed him. So it's not impossible. But I'm kind of with you. I don't know that it'll have the largest impact, because most of these schools are looking for, guys they can develop anyway. And it's not like by moving to the SEC, Texas can now sign 50 dudes a year. That would be a heck of a advantage if it was. But yeah, there's still going to be people who want to play in Kansas, And I mean, it could make it harder, because you hear all the time when I ask recruits, hey, why'd you choose Kansas State, especially guys from Texas? It's because I want to play in the Big 12, and I'll still get to play in Texas a lot. So I'm going to Kansas State, and they're in the same conference. So I think if whatever the Big 12 looks like, or whatever conference these guys are in a few years, if they still have access to Texas, if they're still one of the top 5 conferences in the country, even if it's not called Power 5, I don't know that it'll diminish recruiting all that much. But if you're going up for a guy who legit has NFL aspirations, maybe it makes it harder. Maybe it makes it harder for K-State to keep a guy who grew up in Wichita and has offers from Tennessee and Arkansas to stay and go to K-State instead of going there. But overall, I don't see a huge impact. We'll see, though.
That's a good point, Tellis. All right, let's. This is all football driven, of course, but colleges, in case you didn't know, play other sports as well, and including men's basketball. We talked about maybe the impact on the conference realignment would have on the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. I wanted to run this by you guys as well. Things I think about. What I've seen in college basketball historically, but it's especially true over the last several years, is you don't have to have a power football program to be really good in basketball. And Kansas is living proof of it. But other schools like Villanova, Gonzaga, you can say Butler, Creighton. Now, those are private schools as well. And so there's a difference in the structure. We're not talking about big state universities. But, I'm just, thinking, can a Kansas State, Texas Tech, any school that just, where basketball is really important, maybe it'll be that way at TCU one day with Jamie Dixon, but can they live happily ever after in a reduced or diminished football conference, reduced brand football conference, and maintain their basketball bona fides?
I think they can, mainly because what you just mentioned. Gonzaga is in one of the worst basketball conferences in the country, and they're amazing. Doesn't stop them. Creighton, no football. Villanova, no football. Baylor, most years, doesn't have good football. They just won a national championship. So there's nothing to stop you from doing it. I think it does make it harder, just because there is more notoriety and more exposure if you're in a power conference that has good football. But I mean, shoot, Duke historically doesn't have great football. They're really good in basketball. North Carolina, I mean, Mac Brown's trying to change it right now, but they typically don't have great football. I think basketball wise, especially what I mentioned earlier, if you could add somebody like Houston, Cincinnati, and Memphis, then, oh man, they're probably a better basketball league than they were before all this. Again, that's maybe a long shot, maybe it isn't. We don't know what ends up happening, but I think basketball wise, if those teams stick together, they'll be just fine. It's football, unfortunately, that's the bigger head scratcher.
Well, I think the Big 12 basketball has a pretty good reputation right now, and they're always top 2 or 3, whatever computer ranking is applied to rating strength of conference. I saw Jay Billis interviewed about this earlier this week, and some other basketball. Of course, nobody cares about what basketball thinks in realignment, but I just think there can be happiness in a Big 12 without Texas and OU for schools that are, I guess, a little more basketball centric. As good as Iowa State football's been the last few years under Matt Campbell, I think I'd include Iowa State. Just great, historically solid basketball, and Hilton Coliseum, one of the great venues in the sport. So just trying to think of all the possibilities here, because we're just a week into the discussion of conference realignment. And of course, there are many, many more questions than answers, and speculation runs rampant. And I'm glad we got to do it today with Kellis Robinette and Drew Davison. Kellis of the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star, Drew of the Fort Worth Star Telegram. Guys, appreciate the conversation, and we will continue to talk as this continues to be a story.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Tip of the cap to Kellis Robinette and Drew Davison for stopping by and talking Big 12. Links to their stories can be found in the show notes, and Kellis's stories can be found on kansascity.com and kansas.com. Hey, we have another deal for you. You can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. Sports Pass is the online version of the Star Sports section. You get all the stories that appear in the print editions of the Star, plus additional stories that appear only on the website, and of course they're posted first on kansascity.com. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month, unless you cancel. And it's a great time to subscribe. Read about what's going on with the Chiefs at training camp, with the Royals, who are hot, the colleges. We know there's a bunch going on with the Big 12 and SEC, the soccer teams, and more. How do you get it? You go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That's kansascity.com/sportspass2020. Do you want more than just sports coverage? Check out the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You got all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional national news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition.
The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And I know that's a lot of dots and dashes. So if you have any trouble hunting down any of those offers, you just send me an email, bkirkhoff@kcstar.com. I'll get you to the right place. So whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like Sports Beat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with another episode.